There it is. Okay.
So Arthur Loomis, legendary architect of Jeffersonville and Louisville. I want to thank architectural historian William Scott, Bill Scott to me, for his research on Arthur Loomis. Bill did a talk on Clarke and Loomis back, I want to say 2008 or so era, did a lot of research at that time, and since I've supplemented what he did back in, that many years ago, but Bill's still a good friend of mine. He lives over in Lexington, Kentucky. He's also a very foremost Frank Lloyd Wright historian. He's on the Taliesin board of directors. It goes out to Taliesin and Scottsdale a lot on those. But anyways, Bill Scott, I want to thank him. So let's start where it all began in Westfield, Massachusetts, where the Loomis family lived and where Arthur was born. And so it's in the southeast corner of Massachusetts there. And these are some of the scenes from the town. So his father was named John and his mother Clarissa. As you can see there, they had 8 children. And you can see Arthur where he was at in the overall scheme of things. And they moved to Jeffersonville in 1861. So he was born in Westfield, Massachusetts. He was draftsman for architect Charles Clarke, who I will talk about shortly. And he became a partner with Clarke when I think he was, 33 years old when he became a partner with Clarke. But he was, 18 years old, I want to say, 18 years old when he became a draftsman for Charles Clarke. So there they both are, Clarke and Loomis, very famous architects. So Charles Julian Clarke was very involved, one of the original members of the American Institute of Architects, very active. He was the first president of the local American Institute of Architects back in 1908. These are his parents, Joseph and Harriet, and they actually lived in Frankfort, Kentucky. And Charles never lived in Louisville as such. He took the train on a Monday into Louisville, stayed at a hotel in Louisville, and then on Friday went back to Frankfort. So he was a commuter. So here is some of Charles's siblings that are listed here and where he would fit in the overall scheme of things. So Arthur, at age 44, he married Carrie Dorsey, age 41, on December 9th, 1902. And, as you may know, Carrie was the daughter of Captain Dorsey, who was superintendent of the Jeffersonville and Louisville Ferry Company. I'm not sure why Arthur married her, but I wonder if he got a good discount on those ferry rides. Again, Arthur, like Charles, was a commuter. He lived in Jeffersonville and rode the ferry over into Louisville. Neither one of them lived in Louisville, and yet they created all these beautiful buildings in Louisville. Of course, they did some. Arthur did some here locally as well, but bulk of their work is in Louisville. But neither one was a native of Louisville. So a little bit of information more on Arthur. So Charles Clarke died in 1908, and then Loomis took over his presidency of the local Architects Association at that time. Charles was the first president in 1908, then he dies, and then Arthur became the second president after Charles passed away. More information here. He was, when Kentucky implemented the registration law, he was number 62 in the registration and all that. And he was a Mason over here, some of you may be familiar with that. This is Charles's grave site in Frankfort Cemetery. I've actually been there. So the Clarke family owns a lot of property, one of the major landowners in Frankfort, Kentucky, and that's one reason why Charles kept going back to Frankfort, because they had so much land there. And then after Charles passes away, Arthur teams up with Julius Hartman, become Loomis and Hartman Architects in 1910. So let's talk about some of the buildings. So that's some of the background to Arthur Loomis and who he was partnered with and where he was from. Some of the dramatic buildings that they built, of course, here in Jeffersonville, the library here. It's phenomenal. I understand is it vacant now, or is it someone's getting ready to buy it? I've heard various things.
It's occupied.
Is it occupied now? Now, I know that they did a tremendous renovation.
Ogle Foundation.
Ogle
And River Heritage.
Right. I understand they did that magnificent renovation of it back in the early 2000s, 2005, 6, something like that. It's phenomenal. I think I got some photographs of it. So glad they saved it and maintained it. Of course, he also did the New Albany Library as well. Some of the drawings that they did. Always like seeing the original drawings of what they did. And of course, there is, it actually says Clarke and Loomis Architects. Some construction photographs of the Carnegie Library here in New Albany. Some more photographs with the, take it that's the 1937 flood in the lower left-hand corner there. It's just a magnificent building. I'm glad they're still using it as sort of a cultural center today. And then he did the building over in Shelby Park neighborhood in Louisville. And I'm so glad we saved this. As you'll hear throughout my presentation, I've been involved in saving a lot of Clarke and Loomis buildings. This is one of them. Jefferson County Public Schools in 1998, 99 wanted to tear all this down, build a school here, and horrible preservationists say over our dead body, and we were able to save all this. It's still a park. They built the school elsewhere. In fact, what they ended up doing was they wanted to take this, it was an Olmsted Park. Not only was it was a Clarke and Loomis building and an Olmsted Park they wanted to tear down. And we said, oh gosh, you can't do that in Louisville. And so we fought them for several years, and finally they came to us and said, guess what? Just a couple of blocks south of this property, there was another vacant block that used to be a school. And they said, guess what? We're going to put the school there. We said, that's great. Good idea. Never know what you get involved to with preservation efforts. Some churches. This is St. Matthew's Evangelical, 1908. This would have been a Clarke and Loomis project. It's now the House of Ruth. St. Paul's Evangelical, phenomenal building. And this is when I really got involved in preservation in 1995. They wanted to tear this down as well and make it a parking lot. And we, horrible preservationists, said over our dead bodies, you're going to do that. For what it's worth, I really didn't know much about Clarke and Loomis some 30 years ago. I wasn't that involved, but I just know we should not be tearing down a building like this. And so what we told the congregation was moving out. They were vacating it, merging with another group outside of Louisville. And they were, oh man, you wouldn't believe it. At the preservation hearing, there were 300 people there at the preservation hearing. It was over at the Kentucky Center for the Arts. Only 2 of us spoke in favor of saving the building. The other 298 spoke to tear it down. And what we said that persuaded the Landmarks Commission was, fine, let's do it this way. For 1 month, for 30 days, put a for sale sign on this building and see if another developer comes along and wants to buy that building. And the Landmarks Commission goes, okay, we can do 30 days. Guess what? A doctor came along, bought it, and turned it into a healthcare clinic. So we saved it. Now then, it is going to be still saved. Some of you may know it's been vacant for some time now. But what they're going to do, and I'll show you here more, but they're going to save the building. This has become a lobby to a hotel. And there was a proposal. So what they're going to do is where the church building and rectory building is, that's going to be the lobby space. The hotel is going to be built around it. And here's another view of that hotel. Yeah, right. Contextually, it's not the best. But the church will be saved over here, and then the hotel built adjacent to it. We're hoping this will get underway here in the near future. The COVID slowed it down, but to my knowledge, it's still being proposed.
Steve, are they going to save the the parsonage which burned?
It's all landmarked, so we'll see. You know, the part of the directory did burn, some homeless got in there not long ago and created a fire, but it's all been saved and boarded up, so we hope that they will.
That's on Broadway.
Yes, we're all broken Broadway.
Except for the gaping hole in the roof of the parsonage. Yeah.
St. Peter's Evangelical, likewise, they wanted to tear this building down a few years ago also, and we horrible preservationists said again, not so fast. And so we challenged the church leadership, and they came up with this great concept of building. They had a huge lot to the side over here. They built a commercial building there that they're renting out. They're getting money from that they're then going to translate into renovating the church. But the church has been saved, and they're going to renovate it.
And once in the parking lot, Mobile Village has received national recognition.
And it's fully
United
leased
Church of
up.
Christ.
Fully leased up and everything, so they're doing well.
Where is that church?
It is at the 13th in Broad, the 13th in West Jefferson, 11th in West Jefferson, 11th in West Jefferson, 11th in West Louisville, just west of Knoxville. This is a St. Luke's Episcopal in Anchorage. That's been done. I've not actually been out to see this church, but Loomis did a number of projects out in the Anchorage area of Louisville. Of course, I did include St. Paul's, of course, and some very nice images of the interior. I actually gave this presentation to St. Paul's a few years ago, so, and some information about it, about how the Howard Steamboat Craftsman built it. I think the nave of the church supposedly has what the bow of the ship or something. There's some reference there that they used. But 937 flood, of course. I'm sure the 37 flood was in this building. I'm not sure how high it went.
This building may not have been here.
Oh, it was not built. That was fortunate. So anyways, and it talks about this plaque. It talks about Arthur Loomis designing it back in 1894, I think it says. Now then, there's a building right adjacent to it, this structure here. And so my question when I was at St. Paul's, I said, well, did Loomis design this? Obviously from the exterior, you're going, I don't think so, I don't know. But it was built about the same time, I think, as the church, so more than likely he had a hand in it. So I went inside and saw this. I said, this is a Loomis design. Yes, Loomis was involved with this, and I'll explain here in a few seconds about that. So you go into any Loomis building, prominent Loomis buildings, and the newel posts of those stairwells are just phenomenal. I love going into Clarke and Loomis, and you can see I've got them named here where they're at. And just the newel posts or anything unlike other newel posts that you might see. So there you go. You can see the decorative design, very similar to some of these. It's not as extravagant, of course, as these others, but being a church, he probably had limited funds, but he did make some interesting newel posts there. So in my opinion, yeah, Loomis was involved in this building. So some houses. Of course, his piece de resistance, Conrad Caldwell House. How's everyone been over the Conrad Caldwell House? Hopefully, yes. If not, you need to go. It's a house museum, just spectacular. The craftsmanship of this is just out of this world. Again, the newel post, the stairways here, the interior. Conrad was in the pork business, and he had the funds to do a house like this. And unfortunately, he dies a few years after he builds this. And the Caldwell family buys it. The Caldwell family was involved in water tanks. And if you've ever seen a huge water tank above a city, it could be that the Caldwell family designed those. And the Caldwell family did a huge bath adjacent to Slugger Museum as well. And the Caldwell still exists, the company does, and a number of the descendants are docents here. And if you could get one of the family descendants as a docent, it would be a very personable tour talking about the house and the furnishings. but it's just a beautiful house, and of course the drawings are just spectacular. They do have the architectural drawings there at the house.
And it also hit the city with the thud, and a lot of the critics called it Conrad's folly.
Right, yeah. Very extravagant house.
Yeah.
Here's another Loomis design that I helped save, the Auerbacher Plymouth House. This was down at 17th and West Jefferson.
The Holland Tax Service.
The Holland Tax Service was in it, highly deteriorated. And I got a call at my desk, I think it was in 2009, I get a call at my office saying, Steve, they're going to demolish this building now. Parts of it are falling off, the city's down there, you better get there now if you want to save it. I literally get up out of my desk and rush down to 17th and Jefferson, and the city inspectors were all around. Part of the other side over here had fallen off, the stonework had, and there was a daycare nearby. And so they were all concerned with the daycare that this house was going to fall in, well, these kids are at. I'm like, oh, geez. But I did a quick analysis and realized that it was non-structural. It was just some loose stone that had come off. We got that repaired, and we were able to save it. And you can see it's a sister house to the Conrad Caldwell house. Auerbacher was in the coffee business. So anyways, we were able to save it. So there it is in its deteriorated state, and there it is restored. So unfortunately it's divided up into like 8 apartments. It's one of those things you have to do to save a building, but it can easily be converted back into a house if need be. But unfortunately, also due to all the deterioration, there was no stairwell. Someone had taken out all the mantles, all the stairwell, everything was gutted on the interior here, so nothing really on the inside.
Don't they took out the release in the rooms?
What's that?
The release, it had these brass release.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And one of them had a, some kind of a display.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. But we were able to save it and anyway, live for another day. This is the Wilson House in Old Louisville. The stairwell design here is just, I'm not sure who their carpenters were, but they were very highly skilled. And this was Gus Wilson, he was a governor of Kentucky. I've always enjoyed this carriage house. I've done a book on carriage houses in Louisville, and this is one of my favorites. But the question is, where was the mansion to this house? There was a big lot in front of this that I assumed that the mansion was there. They tore it down, and you saw this Tudor-style carriage house behind it. So I started to do some research as to what was the original mansion to this house was. So I found an article talking about carriage houses of Louisville, and there it is mentioned there, gave me some clues as to what might have been there. Then I found an ad in the Courier Journal talking about this house. There it is right there, as such.
What year was that ad, do you know?
With this ad, it was in 1920s, 30s. Yeah, in fact, it was bought by a Chicago developer who came in. The Bacon Conway people owned it, and when they died, the house was put up for sale at an auction, I think it was, and a Chicago developer came in, tore the house down, and put up an apartment complex there.
Yeah.
But anyway, some more history of the house that we started to figure out. You know, we found this glimpse here that gave us more clues as to what was the house. And so anyways, we were able to determine that this was a Clarke and Loomis house that had been demolished. They did do that carriage house, but the main mansion was demolished, and an adjacent apartment building was built right there. So here you can see some more Clarke and Loomis designs, very similar to that one that was demolished. More Clarke and Loomis homes in the old Louisville area. That's the Bacon House. A lot of folks thought that this was designed by Mason Murray, another architect in Louisville, but I actually did some research. I said, oh geez, not exactly. It was a Clarke and Loomis design, and these others were likewise. Of course, this is another Jeffersonville proud design by Arthur Loomis. I think it's a law office.
It's not in good shape on the outside.
But again, it has the signature stairwell in the interior. A Hoffman House on Utica Pike. Y'all had an open house there a number of years ago. I was fortunate to go over and look at the stairwell. But you start picking up some clues, not only the stairwell, but other clues to Loomis design by looking at this house. Notice how they did the porch, how it wraps around, the pediment at the top, that feature there. So here's 319 Riverside Drive. And I was just me and my wife walking along Riverside Drive one day, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a Loomis project. I've not been inside to see the stairwell, but it definitely is a Loomis project, as you can tell. I take it y'all have that documented somehow. I had no idea it was. So there's that detail again that you see, the pediment. This is the Coldway Percy Moore Creel Brown house out in Anchorage. As noted, Loomis did a lot of projects out in the Anchorage area. The lobby is just spectacular. You go inside that, it's like Nirvana. Again, the wood craftsmanship here is phenomenal. But they kept saying, we're not certain if Clarke and Loomis designed this. I said, yeah, I look at those newel posts, they designed it. Well, we're still not certain, so I found some more things, like right there. Their signature pediment with the window up there. And so I did a study for them. I said, you tell me that this isn't a Clarke and Loomis house when you compare this with all of this. And the newel post and all that. This is that Coldway house newel post. So yes, definitely. So these are some of the clues you can look for. I get that a lot. Is this a Clarke and Loomis house? But let me look at your pediment. Let me look at your stairwell. Let me look at some of the design, and we'll try. But these are the signature details that you can look for to verify, in fact, that's Clarke and Loomis. I've always been curious with this house on Riverside Drive. Anyone know the history of this? Because I see this pediment here. Is it a Loomis? Does anyone know the history of this house? Yes.
Well, it was built right around the turn of the century as a wedding gift. And the lady who built it, I was going to want to say Aunt Jenny Belknap was her name, and she built it for her niece. And they didn't live in it. Her niece didn't live in it. They moved down to Lexington, Kentucky. So the house went to somebody else eventually. That's about.
Do you have any original photographs of it by chance? Because I would like to see what this actually looked like originally. Because when you look at it closely, they have two columns right here, which Loomis always put two columns in his windows in the pediment. And it's obviously been structurally changed. But I bet you that, I've not been inside. I should have went in when there was a restaurant. I think it's closed now. But I'm not certain what the stairwell looks like in here. But it's definitely a pretty significant house that a designer had some input into. And my guess is it's a Loomis. But I'll let y'all figure that out. But that's my guess. So some other landmarks. The Speed Museum. Hopefully everyone's been to the Speed. Phenomenal building. Some photograph spots under construction. Just love the Speed. I haven't been there recently. Of course, they put this big glass box on the adjacent to it there, which has some mixed responses too. Another one of their famous buildings. We now call it the Old Spaghetti Factory. My grandsons love going here all the time, but I'm glad that it's been saved as well. They've got the restaurant on the first floor, and then apartments or condominiums up above, residential above. So there is a sort of a rendering of it. Now I'll show you what the original design that Clarke and Loomis had done for this building. There. Want to talk about over the top? I'm sure when the Levy brothers got that price for that budget, they're like, well, can we scale it down a bit? Move it in, yeah. They kept some of the same lower level design, but they lopped off the top a bit. But yeah, that was the original scheme.
Can you imagine if that was built, what the term lit up like Levy's would have been?
Agreed, yes. The U of L Dental School, it's now called the Meyer Medical Lofts. And again, this building was proposed to be demoed a few years ago. The State Highway Department wanted to buy it from the University of Louisville. And so, and they were going to literally just demolish it and make it a parking lot. And we're like going, I don't think so. So a number of us preservation groups got together, wrote a combined number of letters to the U of L president saying, please don't demolish it, please save it. And so Nellie Bettaputi, who was president at the time, consented to that. She sold it to a developer who turned it into the Myers Medical Lofts. And it's been totally renovated on the interior, turned out to be very well. Not sure if anyone got to go see the open house when they had it a few months ago, but it's a spectacular renovation. You can see it was kind of deteriorated condition here, and then how they transformed it, brought it back. The Masonic Lodge, of course, right there, and I would have had the date filled in there if Carl Kramer had returned my emails. But I understand it was, what, 1926 or so it was built, so definitely, and Loomis being a Mason, I'm sure got the commission on this. And notice the stairwell, he didn't do it out of wood, did he? But he did it out of marble. And if you've not been in the building yet, the Louisville Historical Aid, we're having a program there on Sunday, August 20th at 2 o'clock. And someone named Carl Kramer is going to be talking about Civil War generals. And it's free and open to the public. So if you've not been inside it, it's spectacular what they've done on the interior. And so we're going to have a late event there on August 20th at 2 o'clock, free if you all want to attend. So their legacy, let's talk about, so they've done a lot of great buildings, obviously. Here are some over in the Louisville area, more the Todd building on the left, the Bond Bakery building here, which I keep hearing is going to be renovated. It's in very deteriorated condition right now, but I did a talk last year and this developer came up, hey, we bought it, we're going to renovate it, but haven't seen anything more on it. Of course, the old Carter Dry Goods building, which is now the Louisville Science Center. The old DuPont High School, which is now a residential building, and then the old Med School, which is now, I think, owned by Ronald McDonald House, and they use it there. All those have been still standing, thank goodness. And of course, over here in Jeffersonville, some of the ones indicated there. And I didn't talk too much about the bank building here, but that's obviously Loomis as well. And I do keep all of this on my Excel spreadsheet database, all their buildings, where they're located, when they were built, some notes, if anything in particular was about it. These are projects that Charles Clarke did prior to Loomis coming on board, and then these are projects that Loomis did after Clarke passed away. Now then, I helped back in 2007, 2008, we put up this marker for Clarke and Loomis outside the old spaghetti factory. So if you get over there, you can read the marker. It's right near the entranceway. The question I've got is, does Jeffersonville have a Clarke and Loomis marker over here? Well, you better get on the stick and get one, because he definitely deserves it. And the text is already, you can steal our text.
Thank you.
But anyways, yeah, we got that marker up a number of years ago. Now then, this was where Arthur and Carrie lived once they moved from Jeffersonville to Louisville. They lived on at 511 Belgravia Court in this house here. And so the question I've got is, did Arthur Loomis design this? Can you tell anything about it? The pediment is there. It's got two columns, it's got the big window with the side windows and the sort of a crown pediment at the top. So it doesn't, I've not been inside this. Next time I go down there, I'm gonna knock on the door and say, can I see your staircase? It's the only way to verify it. But this was their home in Belgravia Court. It's right around the corner from the Conrad Caldwell house. This is what's that again?
Where did they live in Jefferson?
I think off, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was off 10th Street, and I've looked for the address and it's no longer there. The house is no longer there. But I want to say it was off 10th Street is where they lived. It's been a while since I did that research, but I know the house no longer exists. This is his obituary when he passed away. By the way, the date here is wrong. He was actually 76 years old when he died. It says he died at his house, 511 Belgravia Court. He was still working at the age of 76. He was doing an inspection of a building, of a house, and the folding bed somehow, it was one of those beds that fold up against the wall, somehow came down. Yeah, and it hit him and broke his hip. And so he was in the bed, bedridden, and then he had a heart attack that killed him. Here it talks more. I just wish they would do more obituaries like this. Nowadays, the obituaries
Don't really tell
are
you.
not. Yes, exactly. As historians, we hate it. Especially they don't tell where the people are being buried either. Why? I don't understand why you don't say, please say where you're being buried, where we historians can come and view, and put the whole date of your birth and death on there. It makes our job a lot easier. But anyways, talks all about him in Jeffersonville and all that. This is his monument over in Cave Hill Cemetery. He's buried near the lake, near the administration building, if you're going to try and find it. But talks about him and Carrie. Carrie passed away first, and then Arthur shortly thereafter. And Arthur had a twin sister, Alice, who never married, and she's buried there along with them. She died in 1940. To my knowledge, are there any Loomises still over in this area? They had a lot of family. I know there's a street over in Clarksville named Loomis Drive, Avenue, whatever, but I've heard that Loomis was not connected to these Loomises, which makes it hard to believe. But anyways, to my knowledge, there's no more Loomises around. So one of the questions we architectural historians always like to say is, we want the drawings. Where are the drawings at? You know, I get calls at least monthly, maybe bi-monthly, from someone wanting to know where the certain architectural drawings are at. And fortunately, as noted earlier, a lot of the buildings have their drawings, but where are their archives today? Well, neither Clarke nor Loomis ever had any children. There were no heirs, no descendants, and there was no successor from them. And their archives were said to be stored in the basement of a downtown Louisville building which flooded in 1937. That's the story I've heard, why there are no archives of Clarke and Loomis. I'm constantly, whenever, I hate to say this, whenever an architect dies in Louisville, I call up their family and say, please, let's grab their archives. A good friend of mine passed away, and I learned a hard lesson on this. In 2001, Larry Milello, great friend of mine, architect, did a lot of great buildings in Louisville, he passes away. I give about 2 or 3 weeks before I call his wife up to ask for the archives. I call up and she goes, Steve, gosh, you should have contacted me a few days ago. I just threw them all out. Oh. So that taught me a lesson, and from now on, we have an active process in Louisville of constantly talking to the architects. Please donate your drawings on a regular basis to the Phil Center or some other historical archive. So we don't want to lose those. So there's my talk. We're on Facebook again. Have books if you're interested. And thanks for attending. Any questions? I'm sorry I did not keep you 2 to 3 hours. Yes.
I kind of wonder about how long
Loomis worked on one of the churches, and how many draftsmen might have helped him, or any kind of...
Well, that's a good question. It always boggles me as an architect. For instance, right now, I designed a clinic 2 years ago in the spring and summer of 2021, 8,000 square feet. It will not be completed construction-wise till the fall of 2023, 8,000 square feet.
Wow.
Why? Why do these buildings take, I hear it from clients all the time, like, why do these buildings take so long? Whereas back in the day, they were able to build these properties within 6 months, 9 months, as such. So, one, they didn't have the infrastructure that we have today. All of the golly, the IT systems nowadays in buildings drives you nuts. This clinic that I've got, you know, gosh, the Apollo space capsule didn't have all the technology that we've got in this simple little clinic nowadays. So that's one thing that drives us nuts, all the infrastructure, mechanical, HVAC systems and all. But as far as how long it would take, one curious thing, so the Conrad Caldwell house that you saw there, guess how many sheets of drawings there are of that property? 6. 6 drawings. Nowadays, if we were doing that thing, and I see Alana back here, how many sheets of drawings do you think that building would take nowadays to do? 30, 40? My daughter is an architect in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She designs house mansions. She took me this past weekend, we were down in Chattanooga. She took me to some of these homes they're building, and it's like, oh, you're doing that? And then she showed me the drawings that they did for that one house, like that thick. It's like, what in the world? So, yeah, they had the craftsmen back then, that I'm sure they just, whoever the woodworking crew was, they just followed Loomis around doing those stairwells. We know what you want, yeah, give us a little sketch, okay, we can do that. You know, back there. Nowadays, a contractor will say, even for a little door frame, we need a drawing of that. We can't build that without a drawing. Right, Alana? Yeah. They're always, all the time they're saying, we need a drawing detail for that. I'm still working on a little clinic project, and they want to add a door into the project while it's being built. You wouldn't believe the hoops I've had to go through with the City of Louisville Building Department to get one door added to this project. So yeah, nowadays the thing's a lot more complicated, but back then they had the craftsmen, they knew what they were doing and were able to implement it. But yeah, they were able to do these drawings fairly, and I don't know how many draftsmen they hired, but I wouldn't think it was that many. And their pen and ink, if you've ever seen their artwork that you can hang up on the walls, it's just phenomenal.
So 100 years ago, when an architect built a building and designed a building, they used principles of physics to know what size a beam would need to be and how long it could extend before it was supported, or how heavy a
You're
foundation.
talking about the structural designs and all this. Yeah, they're all overbuilt as such, but yeah, and they did it without computers. It's amazing. But yeah, no, they back in the day were able to figure all that out, the foundations and everything. Yes.
Was there ever even a remote acquaintance between him and Frank Lloyd Wright? I wonder what they would have thought of each other's work.
Yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright only made one visit to Louisville. That was in 1948, so Loomis was long gone. And I don't know if Loomis would have liked Frank Lloyd Wright's stuff, because he was in Richardsonian designs and more traditional vernacular. So, yeah, it would have been interesting because they were contemporaries, because he was born in 1858, and Frank Lloyd Wright was born, in that middle 1800s. So they were contemporaries of one another. That's a good question.
I'm trying to remember, Steve, was there anyone associated with Loomis after Hartman?
No. Yeah, Hartman died shortly thereafter their partnership, unfortunately. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, I needed clarity on one thing and then a result of another. So I've heard that turrets are popular in Louisville. You know, Louisville's known for its turreted buildings and so forth. Is that because of Loomis, or is that just the thing to do during his time?
Well, my house has a turret on it. But no, it was That was a style at that time, the Tudor style, and yeah, it was very popular and still is. A lot of homes in Louisville still are being built with turrets. If you ever get over to, there's a new neighborhood being built in Louisville called, it's a Wolf Pen Branch, I want to say it's called Glen, Herod's Glen neighborhood. I call it a neighborhood, but it's actually you wouldn't believe what it looks like. If you ever get over there, I'll call Wolf Pen Branch, but they've got new mansions going up there with turrets on them. Yeah, massive things.
Yeah, I see them on the downtown buildings, not just the residences.
Right.
So. The answer I needed, or the result earlier, in your presentation, you had that beautiful wooden lobby. You said pure nirvana. And then you showed us your X-Files investigation. But you never told us, did you convince them it was a Loomis or not?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they definitely,
Sleep tonight.
they have agreed to it, yes. Yes.
I live in the Portland area, we had two drugstores. One point in Portland, and one's at 26th and Bank. One 26th and Bank is still around. They're trying to save it and pave it. You know where the museum is over there?
Yeah, Portland
Have you seen
Museum.
the house that's next door?
Yes, yes.
Was that one of his houses?
No, not that I'm aware of. Any other questions? I want to turn off this thing real fast before it.